2, 1. All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Uh, I'm on today with two people. I know. We got Tony Reed and Joe Brad, and they are going to be discussing uh, different stuff, I guess. Lots of different stuff. I'm going to be moderating, but I'll mostly just be sitting here in the corner. So go ahead, you guys.
Uh, okay, I guess I'll talk.
Yep,
Okay,
go ahead.
sure. Okay, I guess I'll go first then. Um, we could talk about anything from common evidence for common descent through evolution, any of those evidences, such as geologic column or DNA. We could talk about materialism, objective reality, um, which is probably what we're going to be limited to, abiogenesis, uh, and the biggest topic would be evolution because there's so much evidence for it that we could take all day to talk about it. Uh, but my stance is that I believe that consciousness is its own source. I call it Brahman, and the environment is a hallucination, Maya. I don't believe in objective reality or materialism. I believe the environment is a hallucination or an illusion. There are things that would lead us to conclude that evolution is true, but superficially. But if you dig deeper at it, you may find that it was just a facade. Okay, your turn, Tony.
Well, I mean, I don't really have a lot to to bring to the table as a position. As far as evolution is concerned, I really think the whole point of this conversation is perhaps my perspective on it might be a different way to kind of reach your point of view. I take a different view of the science than some people do, in that I'm more concerned with the practical applications.
Oh.
And you've had discussions in the past with people where you've brought up that practical application doesn't necessarily mean truth, and I'll grant you that. It just because it has a practical application doesn't mean it's true, but it's also the only real indicator we have of any idea of truth. So if I was to really have an opening statement here, I guess it would be, I mean, you have this idea of the Brahman, and me having been familiar with some Hindu ideas, I think I know where you've gotten a lot of those ideas on what the Brahman is, and but I'd love to know what the practical applications of your view of the Brahman is. How do we apply that to real life? What products can we create out of it? What innovations can we make from it that make the world better? Besides just a philosophical argument that we should behave a certain way, I'd love to see what the actual applications of that particular idea are.
Okay, my turn.
Go ahead.
Okay. There's really no practical application for it. It actually doesn't matter one way or another. But I define Brahman as consciousness as its own source. And if consciousness is its own source, that's just something that I would like to know. That's something that I just want to know. I can't apply it to real life. There's nothing about morals to it. There's nothing really religious about it. It's just knowing that you may be. It's just knowing that your consciousness is its own source, and I don't see why it can't be its own source, because energy itself, I guess, is its own source. I don't see why not. Um, yeah, there's no practical application for it, but there you might want to know what the evidence is. There's it's conjecture, so whatever there's really not going to be evidence on it because it's conjecture, but there are other ways to draw conclusions other than evidence.
Okay. Well, since basically we've already discussed ahead of time that what I'm concerned with are the practical applications. What predictions can we make? What we can do with it? If we don't have any practical application for it, I don't really have anything other than, I mean, the best I could do is ask you questions that may poke holes in it or may not. I guess my first thing to answer is, why do you think that consciousness is its own source, and what does that actually mean?
Oh, okay, good. Well, there's no working model. For example, materialism. It doesn't. One of my things is does the model at hand have any extra puzzle pieces in it? Is everything accounted for? And consciousness isn't accounted for in a materialist model or in the materialist paradigm. It's kind of an extra puzzle piece. And I think it's reasonable to say, hey, if the brain's not making consciousness, then maybe consciousness is making reality. And that's kind of like how Copernicus took the solar system and said, hey, maybe the sun's not going around the earth. Maybe the earth is going around the sun. All he did was flip flop it. I'm flip flopping consciousness in the brain. Maybe the brain isn't making consciousness, but maybe the consciousness is creating a brain and reality itself. I don't.
It was my understanding from our talks prior to this that this would be really more focused on the, as Tony said, the practical applications. I mean, talking about consciousness as a whole could probably warrant its own discussion, but I thought that this was going to be like Tony said, because you guys had kind of hashed this out.
I really thought we were talking about evolution.
Right. I mean, yeah, but consciousness is, or it seems what you're saying about consciousness doesn't really seem to be correlated with evolution.
It is, but not in any way that anybody wants to hear. It's not going to be interested.
Well, may I go ahead and to bring it back to the practical application phase? When it comes to consciousness, one of the things about the brain, perhaps creating consciousness. Let me first of all, when you're talking about Copernicus and the and flipping heliocentrism to geocentrism, he made predictions. He used the idea that the sun was the center of our solar system to make predictions as to why the planets that we see would go into what we call retrograde. If you were to map certain planets as they're orbiting, you'll notice that they seem to go one direction, and then for some reason they stop, go the opposite direction, and then maintain their course again. And this wouldn't have been explained in a geocentric universe, but it was explained by a heliocentric universe. And then from there, more and more predictions from that assumption came to light. Now, as far as the idea of the brain being the source of consciousness, I'll grant you there's a very good possibility that consciousness may be its own source. Who knows? But if we were to assume that the brain was the source of consciousness, and you were to go into, just take a scalpel and cut out portions of a person's brain, you would notice portions of their consciousness would disappear. Portions of their personality would disappear. It is very common for somebody to suffer a brain trauma and their entire personality were to change. And unfortunately, I've known a lot of athletes who have taken a lot of hits to the head and become far more violent and even, kill themselves. People that seemed like they had a zest for life. So whether or not the brain creates consciousness, the idea or the assumption that it does has practical application. We can predict that if you remove a particular portion of a brain, somebody will stop acting a certain way. They use that for certain, and this borders on immoral. Obviously, you know all about the. I'm sure you've heard about lobotomies. They were put into effect because they worked. They chilled people out. Now, granted, it was a barbaric practice, but it did in fact work. Um, to unfortunate levels, and also with certain schizophrenia, splitting the brain and just leaving it there, causing lack of synaptic fire between both lobes of the brain or both halves of a brain, makes a difference in somebody's life. So again, the whether or not the brain creates consciousness, the actual fact that we can actually physically alter the brain and change how somebody thinks, acts, and change their consciousness. Is that actually a practical application of that method?
Okay, I understand where you're coming from exactly. Okay, good. Uh, so there's this thing where you could think inside. There's a thing that you could think inside the box, or you could think outside the box. Thinking inside the box is good for its own purposes. You could choose to think inside the box, and it has practical applications. It's more scientific. It works. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that's called naturalistic methodology. There's a name for it. But if you want to step outside the box and think about maybe more about different things about consciousness, you're going to come to different conclusions. But yeah, there's nothing wrong with thinking inside the box. I just like to think outside the box. Most people would say I'm wasting my time. But like to say the degree of consciousness may be throttled through the brain. However, there is no proof that the brain itself is the source of consciousness. The brain may just be a medium for Brahman or consciousness.
Okay. Well, again, first of all, let me start with thinking outside the box is always a good thing, and then testing what your thoughts are, finding out whether they actually hold true in reality. That's where we come into science. Science is all about testing your ideas that are outside of the box, and then letting other people who are also educated in the same field you're in take their shot at disproving everything you've presented. And the whole peer review process is full of people who thought outside of the box, and the vast majority of them were beaten down. But every once in a while, somebody has a new idea that changes the way everybody thinks. But it's because they thought out of the box, and then they went and got evidence to support their view and let the rest of the community take their best shot against their idea. So thinking outside of the box is not a problem for me. That's a great idea. Think outside of the box, and then let's test your ideas. I forgot what the rest of your statement was about, but
I just said that it was in response to what you said about brain injuries. The degree of consciousness may be throttled through the brain, like if you break it or something. However, there's no proof that the brain proof in quotation marks. There's no proof that the brain itself is the source of consciousness. It may just be a medium for consciousness.
Okay.
So it's a medium.
Okay,
perhaps.
so when you say proof in quotes,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's because somebody has told you that that proof is not a scientific concept,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So yeah, if you're going to tell me that nothing is ever proven, I'll agree with you all day.
Okay.
I'll agree with you. It's not proven that the sun's not going to come up tomorrow. We can't prove that until tomorrow, and then tomorrow we'll see the sun comes up. But the point is the point of science, as opposed to reality, science has practical applications every time, every single time. And so my argument, my channel, is not about how creationism taught me reality. It's how creationism taught me real science. And so it's, my concern is not whether it's real or not, it's whether it has any application, because that's the best way we know as to whether something is real. Because if I was, well, I think you get the idea.
Would a personal application be what's the word I'm looking for? What if it's on the application's on a personal level? Like it doesn't have any outside world effect.
That's great if it works for you. Like for some reason, my wife will go ahead and feed her cat a homeopathic remedy, and every once in a while, the cat chills out and acts correctly. But I mean, she can't really demonstrate anything reliable. I would say more than half the time, the homeopathic remedy doesn't work. So there's got to be something else. There must be something else that's affecting how our cats react. But as far as practical application, again, that's what science is. And if you want to say that you've got an unscientific view, I'll agree with you all day. If you want to say it's reality, you're going to get some pushback, but I'm willing to listen to what you have to say. But if you're going to call it science, that's when I'm going to have an issue.
I call it more like philosophy, but there's really no working model as to how neurons could emerge, how consciousness is an emergent property of the brain, vice the brain emergent property of consciousness. But once you figure it out, it'll blow your mind.
What do you mean there's no theory on that?
So the brain is neurons, right? Neurons and central nerve system and stimuli. Our brain constructs reality, right? There's no real working model as to why consciousness exists, as opposed to just us being human zombies. Do you know what I mean by human zombies? Like humans, I don't know. I don't have a better word for it right now. Humans acting in society just like they do, but without the added ingredient in consciousness. If we're just chemicals, we should be able to go to work without knowing about it at all. We could just be unconscious. I feel like consciousness is an extra puzzle piece in the materialist worldview. And by placing it as its own source, it makes everything make more sense.
Well, this is where computer science might help you. There's actually a great series online called Crash Course in Computer Science. Do you need to answer that?
I can't believe you heard it. No, it's my alarm. It was my alarm waking me up for this. It's too late.
20 minutes later?
I can't believe you heard it.
Yeah, we heard it. Okay, so gates. There's something called a logic gate. And it's really, it actually is based on just how an electron flows. There are very simple chemical operations that will cause a yes or no response. Now, anybody who's done any coding or worked with any computer knows that in the end, the greatest video game you have still comes down to a choice of 0 or 1, yes or no. It's a logic gate, one or the other. Consciousness can be explained by that very same process. Now, can we make predictions on it? Perhaps. Am I prepared to show you predictions that we can make on that? I don't know. I could probably think about it for like 10 minutes and come up with something, but if anybody's going to watch this, they don't want to watch me sit there going, So, but what we can say is that even with the limited AI that we have, we still have been able to produce AI with the use of just zeros and ones to produce something that looks like a real person talking. In fact, there's a program called ELIZA that I know from the 80s when I was a computer hacker that we used in a lot of online games. We would program a bot to go interact with people and watch how they would react to our poor bot that was using the ELIZA program. They were fooled for a good long time into believing that it was a human being. But again, it was every single reaction that that particular program had was just a sequence of 0 and 1. And 0 and 1 happens in reality all the time. If you do a litmus test, that is simply a particular chemical that either flashes red or white
Oh,
when
wow.
it experiences another chemical. That is
Okay.
a choice. So 0 and 1 is the basis of quite a bit of what we could call decision making. I can't say it's part of. I can't confirm that it's part of consciousness, but we can deduce that.
Okay. So consciousness is information processing.
Could be.
All right, could be. I've heard that argument actually put sometimes. All right, Jackson. Anything to say?
I'd actually like to hear what you have to say, Jackson, because actually the person you should be talking to is Jackson. But
I had never thought of it that way, and that was mind blowing. But actually, that makes a lot of sense. And don't they say solutions to complex problems are often very simple? So, but I thought that was very interesting. I don't know. I don't really have much to say on this.
Thank you.
You guys seem to be doing well so far. So
All
I don't
right.
know how long you want to go. You have more questions?
Well, I know that at one point in time, John, you'd said you'd wanted to go into kinds versus species, and do you want to go into that subject?
Yeah, I like talking about kinds. Do you want to start? Or do you want me to
Yeah,
start?
well, yeah, I do want to, because when we were talking before doing this, you were telling me you didn't know how many kinds there were, and that's not what I'm talking about. What I don't particularly care how many kinds there are. I know there are certain arguments where I would want to know, but as far as the term kinds, what I'm concerned with is how that can be applied. Species, we don't know how many species there are. There are definitely more than we know of, but the idea of what a species is, and there are people out there that are going to say that there's more than one definition for species, but every one of those definitions has an application. We can tell what a reproductive species is by its ability to reproduce with other individuals. We can tell what a morphological species is by morphological features. So I can go down the list, but I would love that. That's what I would really like to know is how does one determine the difference between one kind or another?
Okay, I got you. Well, this isn't moving the goalpost. It's more like there's ignorance. There's ignorance to how many kinds there are. A kind could be any clad label. There could be bacteria kind, plant kind, animal kind, fungus kind, right? Uh, the idea that there are multiple phylogenetic trees as opposed to one. There could be one kind. There could be thousands. I don't think anybody really knows. That's my point. Is I don't think anybody knows. But what they do is they take DNA and eukaryotes. They say the tree is eukaryotic, a human is eukaryotic. Therefore, we have a common ancestor. Well, we put it to the machine. The computer says, "Hey, you're this much related, 5% related, say," and the less percentage you get out of the computer, the more they got to push back the common ancestor. So they say trees and humans are related with a very distant common ancestor. That's how they do it. However, I think that problem is ambiguous. Trees and humans could have a common ancestor, but they could also be their independent kinds. And the only evidence that I personally would accept is genetic markers, such as pseudogenes that you can actually trace back, nanogs, which are gene duplications that say a monkey has and a human has in the same spot in their chromosomes, genetic markers would be very good evidence for common descent. But I don't know of any very many of these genetic markers that would say a tree and a human is related.
Okay, so there's a little bit to unpack there. As far as the differences, or okay, first of all, it seems like, as far as you said, clades or kinds, you would call them clades.
Individual.
And I would love it if every creationist, and I know you're not a creationist, but I would love it if every creationist did use the term kind to mean clade, because I think you would admit that there are clades within clades.
To a certain extent, but to an unknown extent.
Okay, and I'll grant you it's unknown. I'll grant you that we don't know that everything is related. But what we can do is make certain predictions. And what we can do is take the very same genetic test we use to legally determine relationship between people and apply that to different species and find their relationship. It is technically legal proof of common descent. And that is also something we can do in trees. And as far as, well, I don't know if you consider humans a kind of ape, if you have an issue with that. But one
Humans
thing
are
that
animals.
What's that?
Humans are animals.
Okay. Would you say humans are apes as well?
Yeah.
Well, shit.
Huh.
I don't have anywhere to go with that. I will say, just because I think it's interesting, and why not pontificate when I can, that there's a video by Aaron Ra that was just uploaded in the last 24 hours. I know you've talked to him personally. I believe he's called you the rogue skeptic. Is that what he called you?
Just a minute. I don't remember him calling me that.
Rogue atheist? He called you something, and it's actually a very fitting name. I don't think it's I think you should take it as complimentary, because
Okay.
I thought it was a well put together dubbing, but he put together a video today, or uploaded a video within the last 24 hours, where he pointed out that a particular gene in humans that we share with apes happens to be diminished into a pseudogene. But because it's diminished into a pseudogene, what it happens to be is a regulatory gene. And because it has been diminished, the human brain is much larger than our chimp or gorilla not ancestors, but relatives. So that might be worth looking into. I mean, it's a part one of a 3-part series, and I don't know when the other 2 parts are coming out, but he did present the paper. I didn't happen to download it or anything like that, but it is available right now.
Perhaps you could link me, or is it on his YouTube channel?
Well, recent. number one, yes, I could link you, and number 2, it is definitely on his YouTube channel.
Then I can find it myself.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, but when I go out into nature and I see trees and birds and bees, I think to myself, they could all be related, but they might not all be related. Like I said, objective, the evolution, common descent, Big Bang, abiogenesis, materialism. It could be apparent that that's the way it is, or it could be a facade, which most people aren't worried about whether or not materialism is a facade or objective reality is a facade. But that's my works, and it's not interested. No one's really interested in it, but that's what I do. Let's see. I don't have a problem with evolution. I think nobody has a problem with evolution. I think it's common descent that people have a disagreement on.
Well,
is that me or him?
No, I think that must be him, because I can still see you. Let me check my connection. No, it still says we're doing terrific. I say, Uh,
Poor John.
I say we're doing terrific, but the creationist in the wires might say otherwise momentarily. Um. So Tony, how you doing?
Pretty good, man.
Want me to show you my juggling skills? Da, 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 da. Oh, he says his power cut off. Oh, well.
Well, that makes sense.
Um.
Wait, need to, wait. His power, like, is in.
Yeah, like his electricity cut off.
Oh,
Well.
that sucks. That sucks.
Um. Well, at any
That
rate,
sucks. Poor guy.
it's Well, as it happens, actually, we are about to run out of time because we had more than 2 people in this thing, and so we have only like 7 minutes left. But hey, you guys got up to like 16 or so. Oh, 19 people watching. Hello, everyone. Good to see all of you.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Sorry.
That's right, because you did the video of Mrs. Doubtfire when you were. I actually put the in my most recent video on homology. Well, you saw it where I freezed it or I froze it. I'm sorry.
Hey, it looks like I'm getting a call from Joe.
Well,
Let's see if I can.
I froze it. Well, at any rate, I guess we can cut this then.
Yeah, let's try it a little later. Yeah, it was an interesting discussion, or was heading towards an interesting discussion. So, yeah. Well, I did not realize you had considered the logic gate idea for consciousness.
Nope, I had I really don't read much on neuroscience.
Oh, really?
I read very little on neuroscience, mostly just phylogenetics, and so that is a very when you put it that way that he's calling me too. But when you put it that way that even the most complex video game is just zeros and ones, I thought, yeah, that's right, it is, and so that's a very interesting way to think about it.
What I'd really like is for somebody who is in neurology or even in video games to get on and tell me how wrong I am. But that seems reasonable to me.
Yeah, it does. I mean, they've got the whole kind of continuum from like amoeba, and you've got protists and prokaryotes who can only like react to stimuli, probably. Then you have, kind of animals that have sort of increasing intellectual capabilities. You get up to like dogs and elephants and things like that, and so. But anyways, well, thanks for coming on, and I guess thanks to Joe also, and thank you for everyone watching. And so, I'm going to cut the stream. Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.